We're in Honolulu. Why didn't you come to the airport yesterday, sweetie? My mother's syrupy voice over the phone made my stomach clench. I stood motionless in the middle of Dallas International Airport, my suitcase at my side, as realization crashed over me. They had lied. Deliberately. Yesterday, I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. You told me the flight was today at 2 p.m. I have the text to prove it. The bustling airport suddenly felt suffocating, the happy chatter of vacation-bound families contrasting sharply with the betrayal tightening in my chest. Oh, sweetie, there must have been some mix-up, she said, too breezily. Your sister made it just fine. We're all settled in at the resort now. Of course, Amy made it. Amy was always their priority, their golden child. A bitter taste filled my mouth as the past few weeks replayed in my mind their insistence on handling the flight arrangements, their reassurance that I should focus on work while they took care of everything. I had trusted them, and they had made sure I'd never set foot on that plane. This wasn't a mix-up, Mom, I said, my voice steelier now. You lied. You never wanted me on this trip, did you? The silence stretched, thick and damning. Then, now, Jocelyn, don't be dramatic. These things happen. I hung up. My hands trembled, not from sadness, but from something hotter, sharper. Rage. I had spent years trying to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who sent them money every month, who bailed them out when Dad's early retirement left them struggling. I had sacrificed vacations, weekends, and a down payment on my own home to keep them afloat, and still, they had chosen to cut me out. My phone buzzed with a new message, me's latest Instagram post, a photo of her and my parents on a sun-drenched beach, cocktails in hand. That caption read, "Family vacation begins. Missing you, sis. Wish you could have made it." Something inside me snapped. I scrolled through past texts, my heart pounding. The proof was right there. My mother's message, flights at 2 p.m. on the 15th. But Amy's Instagram story from yesterday, the 14th, showed their boarding passes. They hadn't made a mistake. They had planned this. My phone rang again. My father. "Jocelyn," he began, his voice laced with that familiar disapproval. "Your mother is very upset by your attitude. We made an honest mistake with the dates, and you're blowing this out of proportion. You're a grown woman. You should understand these things happen." I let out a cold laugh. An honest mistake? Then why did Amy know the correct date? Why did you insist on booking everything yourselves? Why have you been lying to me for weeks? Nah, listen, here. No, Dad, you listen. My voice cut like glass. I just checked my bank statements. Last week, I sent you $3,000 for this trip. Was that a mistake too? Or did you just take my money, knowing you'd leave me behind? The silence on the other end spoke louder than any excuse ever could. And standing there, in that airport, I made a decision. This was the last time they would use me. I needed to know. "Jocelyn," my father's voice softened now, trying a different tactic. "You know we're on a fixed income. We needed that money for the trip. You're doing so well in your career. You understand about making sacrifices for family, don't you?" I gripped the phone so hard, my hand was shaking. "Sacrifices for family," I whispered, the words cutting through me like ice. "I've been sacrificing for years. I gave up my savings, my dreams of owning a home, everything to support you and Mom. And this is how you repay me." "Don't be selfish," he barked. "Your sister needed this vacation. She's been under so much stress with her acting career." "Her acting career?" I exploded, voice rising. "You mean that Zara you've been funding with my money, while she lives rent-free in your house, the auditions that go nowhere. Meanwhile, I work 60-hour weeks to support all of you. That's enough," he shouted, his voice brimming with fury. "I won't stand for this disrespect. You've changed, Jocelyn. Money's made you cruel." In that instant, something inside me snapped. The hurt was still there, but now it was hardening into something sharper. "You're right about one thing, Dad. I have changed. And things are about to change even more." I ended the call and opened my banking app. It was time to shut down the bank of Jocelyn once and for all. The drive home was a blur of rage and resolve. At night, I spent hours documenting everything, screenshots of texts, bank transfers, a spreadsheet of every penny I'd given them over the last 2 years. I didn't want to believe it, but the number on the screen made my stomach churn. $47,800. That's what my parents' love had cost me. The next morning, I marched into my bank, closed the joint account I'd opened for them, then called HR to remove my parents from my life insurance policy. With each action, I felt a weight lifting, like I was finally unshackling myself from years of their manipulation. That's when the messages started flooding in. First came the guilt trip from Mom. "I can't sleep, knowing you're upset with us. This is tearing our family apart. How could you be so heartless?" Then Amy chimed in. "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. It was just a misunderstanding. Mom's crying every day because of you." But it was my father's message that really showed me who they truly were. "We raised you better than this. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Your mother needs her medication refilled this week. Don't you dare abandon your responsibilities to this family." I stared at the screen, seething. My responsibilities to the family? What about their responsibility to treat me with basic respect? Instead of responding, I drafted a firm, unemotional email. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Amy, I've done a lot of thinking since yesterday. The Hawaii incident wasn't a miscommunication. It was a deliberate decision to exclude me while still taking my money. This pattern ends now, effective immediately. I am cutting off all financial support. The money I've given you is a choice, not an obligation. You'll need to find another way to cover your expenses. Do not contact me about money again. I need time and space to reevaluate our relationship. Thanks." Within minutes, my phone blew up. My mother left frantic, tearful voicemails, claiming they'd lose the house. Amy's messages were angry, calling me selfish and heartless. My father's texts were filled with threats, warning me about the consequences if I didn't come to my senses. I blocked them all. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, doubt tried to creep in. Years of conditioning told me to prioritize their needs, to believe I was the one being selfish for setting boundaries. But then I thought of standing in the airport, realizing they'd executed their betrayal while taking my money. The next day at work, an unexpected visitor showed up, Aunt Rose, my father's sister. "I heard what happened," she said, sitting across from me. "Your parents asked me to talk some sense into you." I braced for the usual guilt trip, but instead, Rose stunned me. "What they did was cruel, Jocelyn. I've watched them take advantage of your kindness for years. It's time someone told you the truth. You deserve better than this." Tears welled in my eyes as she squeezed my hand. "Finally, someone in my family saw me. They'll try everything to pull you back in," Rose warned. "Stay strong. You're doing the right thing." 2 weeks later, Rose called me at work. Her voice was tight with concern. "Jocelyn, I need to show you something. Can you come to my house after work?" When I arrived, she spread out a stack of papers on her dining table. "Your father came to me last week asking for a loan. He let slip a few things that didn't add up, so I did some digging." What she showed me chilled me to the core. Bank statements, loan applications, credit card bills, proof that my parents hadn't just been using my money to survive. They'd been living well beyond their means, relying on me to cover their extravagant lifestyle. "Look at this." Rose pointed to a credit card statement. "They took out a new card in your name 3 months ago. Have you checked your credit report?" My hands trembled as I pulled up my credit report. There it was, a $155,000 credit card in my name. "That's identity theft," Rose said quietly. "It's a crime." I felt the floor fall out beneath me. "How could they do this?" Rose sighed. "There's more. Remember Amy's acting career? She's not in California. She's been living at home, working part-time at a local coffee shop. The money they claimed was for her headshots and acting classes. They've been using it for gambling." I couldn't process it. It was all a lie. The manipulations, the money requests, the guilt trips, every part of it was an act. My phone buzzed with a new text from my mother. "Please, sweetie, we need to talk. Your father's having chest pains from all this stress. If anything happens to him, It'll be your fault. I showed it to Rose. She shook her head. More manipulation? They're desperate because their house of cards is falling apart without your money. What should I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You have two choices, Rose said. You can press charges for the identity theft, or you can handle this privately, but either way, you need to protect yourself. I thought about all the years I'd given them, about all the lies, the guilt, the manipulation, the emotional and financial drain. I want to talk to them one last time, I said face to face, but I need you there with me. Rose nodded. I'll set it up, but first, we need to gather evidence and freeze your credit. They've shown you who they really are. Jocelyn, believe them. That night, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about were the dreams I'd sacrificed, house I wanted to buy, the vacations I never took, the savings I never had. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd stolen years of my life. But something else emerged, clear and firm. For the first time in my adult life, I was free from the fog of manipulation. It was lifting, replaced with a steely resolve. They wanted to play games. Fine. This time, I'd be the one setting the rules. The confrontation was set for Saturday afternoon at Rose's house. I spent the morning with a lawyer, learning my options about identity theft. Then I gathered everything: credit card statements, bank transfers, text messages, the proof I needed to show them that their game was over. When they arrived, Amy was with them. She looked nothing like the carefree girl in those Hawaii photos. Her face was strong, guilt-heavy in her eyes. They filed into Rose's living room, uneasy, like children called to the principal's office. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice steady. I've discovered some things we need to discuss. Jocelyn, my mother interrupted, already tearful. Before you say anything. No, I cut her off. I'm talking now. I laid out the credit card statements. Would anyone care to explain this? The color drained from my father's face. Amy looked confused, but my mother quickly jumped in. It was an emergency, she said, voice shaky. We were going to tell you. An emergency? I laid out more papers: gambling debts, maxed out credit cards, Amy's fake acting career. Amy's head snapped up. What do you mean, Flocka? I turned to her. You really don't know. They've been telling me you were in California, pursuing acting. That's where my money supposedly went: your headshots, classes, rent. Amy stared at our parents in shock. I've been working at Starbucks. They told me you refused to help with my college tuition. The room erupted into chaos. Amy cried. My mother scrambled to explain, and my father stood up, his face a mask of rage. Enough, he shouted. We did what we had to do. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, pulling out my final piece of evidence. You committed identity theft. That's a federal crime. I have two choices here: press charges or handle this privately. Your decision. My mother collapsed into dramatic sobs. You wouldn't. We're your parents. Parents don't steal from their children, Rose interjected firmly. Parents don't lie, manipulate, and commit fraud. Just then, my father grabbed his chest, staggering. My heart, he gasped. Call an ambulance. For a moment, I almost fell for it, but then I looked at my mother in a panic, but cold calculation. This was their final play, their last attempt to regain control. No, I said firmly, no more manipulation. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign a repayment agreement for every penny you stole. You're going to close that fraudulent credit card, and you're going to leave me alone. And if we refuse, my father asked, his heart attack somehow forgotten. Then I'll press charges, and you'll explain your actions to a judge. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father nodded, defeated. My mother stared at the floor, her tears suddenly gone. Amy looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. As they signed the repayment agreement my lawyer had prepared, I felt no satisfaction, just a deep, hollow sadness for the family I once believed in. In the weeks that followed, my parents' carefully constructed fund crumbled completely. Without my financial support, they had no choice but to sell their house and move into a small apartment. The repayment agreement drained their retirement income, leaving them with little left to live on. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. Amy moved in with Rose temporarily, while she figured out her next steps. She called me one evening, her voice small and uncertain. "I had no idea what they were doing," she said. "All these years, they've been playing us against each other. I'm so sorry, Jocelyn." Her apology meant something, but it didn't erase the years of damage. Still, it was a start. My parents tried one final time to manipulate me. They showed up unannounced at my office, causing a scene in the lobby. "We'll lose everything," my mother wailed. "After all we've sacrificed for you." I stood my ground, surrounded by concerned colleagues. "You lost me," I said calmly. "That's the only thing that matters, and it was your choice." Security escorted them out. As I watched them leave, I felt nothing but peace. The guilt that had burdened me for years was gone. I was no longer their ATM, their emotional punching bag, or their victim. That evening, I booked a trip to Hawaii just for me. As I confirmed the reservation, I smiled at the irony. They'd tried to exclude me from a family vacation, but in doing so, they had given me something priceless: freedom. 3 months later, I stood on a beach in Maui, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. This wasn't the family vacation I'd once imagined, but it was exactly what I needed. My phone buzzed peacefully, without the usual flood of guilt-tripping messages. It was a text from Rose. "They're finally moving out this weekend," she wrote. "Amy's enrolled in community college. She wants to have coffee when you're back." I took a deep breath, inhaling the salt air, and replied, "Tell her I'm open to it." The repayment plan was working, slowly but surely. My parents had sold most of their possessions. Every month, a check arrived from them, not because they were sorry, but because they had no choice. The fraud charges I'd held back would surface if they missed a single payment. My mother still sent emotional emails from different accounts. "We're eating ramen noodles while you're living in luxury. Is this what you wanted?" I deleted them without responding. Their guilt trips no longer had any power over me. At work, I earned another promotion. The energy I used to spend managing my parents' chaos now went into building my own life. I even started looking at House a Dream I had long put on hold, while funding their lifestyle. Standing on that beach, I finally understood. Sometimes, the happiest endings don't require forgiveness, force, or reconciliation. Sometimes they come from walking away and choosing yourself. My parents had planned that Hawaii trip to hurt me, but instead, they had set me free.